We can use hypothesis testing for basic science and for applied science. In basic science, the goal is to increase the understanding of the natural world, to gain knowledge for knowledge's sake. Applied science is the use of the Western scientific method to solve practical, real-world problems and to develop technology. Scientists use a combination of deductive reasoning and inductive reasoning. Deductive reasoning is where we use general principles to predict specific results. In deductive reasoning, there's a first major premise, followed by a second minor premise, and then ending with a conclusion based on reasoning and evidence. For example, all birds lay eggs. Pigeons lay eggs, therefore pigeons are birds. Inductive reasoning uses specific and limited observations to make generalizations. A famous example is Charles Darwin's development of the theory of evolution by means of natural selection, based on the observations that he made on the trip around the equator on the HMS Beagle and other fossilized and living specimens collected by himself and others. These thousands of small observations all led to the theory of evolution by means of natural selection. According to this theory, small changes in traits from parent to offspring accumulate to increase the survivorship and the reproduction in given environments, and it has resulted in the diversity of life that we see on Earth today. This leads us to the difference between a scientific theory and a common usage of the word theory. The common usage of the word theory kind of means hypothesis or guess. But a scientific theory is a well-substantiated, comprehensive explanation of natural phenomenon that is supported by a vast body of evidence collected over time through observation and experimentation. It is accepted as scientific truth, but it has the possibility to change based on new evidence. The theory of evolution and cell theory are both important scientific theories in biology. Cell theory replaced the idea of spontaneous generation first introduced by Aristotle. People thought that life just appeared. Mice would show up in stored grain. Maggots would appear on meat. Experiments conducted by Francis Redi in 1668 and Louis Pasteur in 1861 provided the evidence that contradicted the idea of spontaneous generation. Redi showed that maggots appeared on meat only when flies were allowed to land on the meat and lay eggs on it. Pasteur showed that boiled broth, which killed all the microbes in the broth, stayed sterile if the broth did not come into contact with the air. In fact, you can see the same flask of broth that Pasteur boiled in a museum in Paris still to this day. The idea of spontaneous generation was not supported by the evidence, and that was replaced with the new data to give us cell theory. Scientific models are an important part of understanding the natural world. Scientific models can be physical, manipulative models that help us understand small-scale or large-scale concepts. Famously, Francis Crick and James Watson used a physical model to help them figure out the structure of the DNA double helix based on the molecular evidence. Niels Bohr used drawings to understand how subatomic particles of protons, neutrons, and electrons interact to form atoms. We can also use mathematical models based on past data to predict what might happen in the future based on various scenarios.